It's great to see everybody. I am going to do this right here. It's great to see you. A wonderful way to start the year. And I'm so excited for our very first Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation Literary Club of 2022-2023. I can't quite say 5783 yet, but close enough. And also our first JBC, our first Jewish Book Council speaker of this year. And today's program is in partnership with the Jewish Book Council, so we're so grateful to them. I also want to thank Mara Brick and Bonnie Youngentab. I'm not sure that Bonnie made it in yet. I know she was having some difficulty too, but I want to thank them for all of their help and support in choosing books for our literary clubs as well. Thank you as always to Lori Wise. I know we have lots of exciting programming ahead in the year. And so we've heard about just a little bit of that so far and look forward to seeing you at many of those events. So I want to start with a couple of things. I want to first let you know that if you have not already read the book, I know many of you have, I am putting a link in the chat so that you can, hopefully this will work as a link. It doesn't look like it did, but I can go back and get to it when she's talking. That we hope that you'll have a chance to purchase and read Lisa's book, whether through the WHC Mitzvah Mall or a local bookseller. So I am so excited. And let me, hold on. I had her in my sights and now I have to go back and find her again. There we go. I'm so excited to welcome Lisa Barr to Washington Hebrew Congregation. I am thrilled to have her with us today. I was already thrilled, but certainly after reading her book and then again after having some time to talk in preparation for today, we are in for a real treat. Lisa Barr is the New York Times bestselling author of Women on Fire, The Unbreakables, and the historical thriller Fugitive Colors, a suspenseful tale of stolen art, love, lust, deception, and revenge on the eve of World War II. The novel won the IPPY Gold Medal for Best Literary Fiction 2014 and first prize at the Hollywood Film Festival Opus Magnum Discovery Award. In addition, Lisa served as an editor for the Jerusalem Post, managing editor of today's Chicago Woman, managing editor of Moment magazine, and as an editor reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Among the highlights of her career, Lisa covered the famous handshake between the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, the late PLO leader Yasser Arafat, and President Bill Clinton at the White House. Lisa has been featured on Good Morning America and Today for her work as an author, journalist, and blogger. And in breaking book news, some of you may have seen this, I don't know if you have yet, but actress Sharon Stone is set to produce and star in the film adaptation of Woman on Fire. So the book itself has been a New York Times bestseller, a USA Today bestseller, a Barnes & Noble March Book of the Month fiction pick, an Audible #1 bestseller, mystery, history, historical fiction, and suspense. I read it, but I can see how that would be at the time. Also an Audible listener. I have to use that time in the car between Bindaman and Temple. So I do a lot of books through that as well. A Katie Couric must-read book 2022, BuzzFeed list must-read historical fiction 2022, and more. Publishers Weekly, Jewish Book Council, essay on stolen art. There's so much. Lisa, even more than that, is just delightful. And I want to just, before she begins to speak, we're going to hear from Lisa. She's going to probably answer many of your questions in the process. And I know we have some questions for her, but I invite you, if you have questions during the talk, you can send them to me directly so that they won't distract or take away from Lisa's presentation. And we are so delighted to have you with us, Lisa, and excited to be able to talk about this fabulous book.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi, first of all, wow, you're so hired, but you already have another job. I mean, oh my God, big mazel tov on your new position. I've heard all about it. It's so exciting.
I will say thank you, Lisa. When Lisa and I, before we talked, I think she emailed and she congratulated me already. She already knew, because I guess good word travels fast, but it was so nice to know that you had already heard.
Exactly. No, it's really exciting. And Marcia, I want to thank you for all the organizing. And this is kind of funny. Bonnie, is she in the crowd? Bonnie, who organized this? Anyway, I get a message from my editor last night that she had heard I'm speaking today because Bonnie works with her husband, or a business partner with her husband. So my editor, Sarah Nelson at HarperCollins, is wonderful. And Bonnie, I mean, it's just amazing how everybody is connected. And I really wanted to thank, I'm just going to slip on my glasses here. First of all, I just want to make sure, can you hear me? Everyone can hear me? All right, awesome. All right, so most of all, I wanted to thank you, the Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation, for inviting me here today and showing up. And I love being your first to kick off this series. A girl never forgets her first. So thank you for that. And a special shout out to the Jewish Book Council for their incredible support of my work. And just to go back and to kind of adding on to what Rabbi had said and had mentioned about me, I'm Lisa Barr, and I'm an author, a mom of 3 daughters, a wife, and a journalist, and I'm a Chicago girl. I attended Solomon Schechter Day School growing up, which instilled a love of Judaism and Israel and gave me the creative goods at a young age. My teachers nurtured my love of writing and encouraged me to always ask questions and go deeper. I graduated from University of Illinois and got my master's at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. So Chicago journalism was my boot camp. So I began my career right out of college at Margie Korshak Public Relations, which was a big arts and entertainment agency in the city. So I started there as an intern, and then they hired me. And my first client was this place that probably none of you have ever heard of. It's called Starbucks. So yes, about 100 years ago, I took this, then CEO, and then he came back again, Howard Schultz, around to all the radio stations to introduce this new coffee experience. So that was my first gig. I then worked for political news commentator Joel Wiseman as his researcher for 2 years at WGN TV in Chicago. And Joel really taught me how to never take no for an answer. No matter what, you had to get the story. I then went on to become the managing editor of a news magazine in Chicago called Today's Chicago Woman, which is a great story in itself. And I love to tell stories. You're going to hear a bunch of them. But this one I'd like to tell, especially young readers or young listeners, or if you have daughters or granddaughters, that there are always opportunities where you least expect it. So I was working out at a health club, and it was the end of the workout, and I'm in my towel, and I hear over the locker bank 2 women speaking. And one said, I need a new managing editor. I think I'm going to announce it tomorrow. And I thought to myself, looking down in my towel, this isn't optimal, but so I went around the locker bank and I said, hey, I'm Lisa. I couldn't help but hear. And the 2 women were there and they were naked. And long story short, we did our interviews right there in towels on the bench, and I got the job. And I ended up serving as managing editor for Today's Chicago Woman for a couple years. And I had my own column interviewing prominent Chicago personalities, and like advice columnist Ann Landers, if you remember Ann Landers. And we actually did the interview in her giant closet. It was really something. Anyway, at about age 28, I decided I needed a real change. And I had just gotten out of a long relationship, and everyone, meaning my family, was driving me crazy. Why wasn't I married? You're on a ticking clock. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm out of here. I want adventure. So I moved to Jerusalem with just my bike, 2 bags, and a computer. And I became a reporter and an editor for the Jerusalem Post for the next 5 years. And I would have to say that it was the best job of my life. I covered everything from interviewing presidents and prime ministers to celebrities like Madonna, Robert De Niro, Sting, Guns N' Roses, Bob Dylan. But it was not an easy gig. In the early 90s, there was a slew of bus bombings in Jerusalem. And it being the Jerusalem Post, everybody was on a shoestring budget. So you had lots of jobs at the newspaper. So one of my assignments was covering the hospital waiting rooms, interviewing parents of loved ones who were waiting to hear if their loved ones were alive, dead or alive, in that terror attack, whatever it was at that moment. And you can imagine I would have to shove a microphone under someone's face, and it was really hard and it was devastating. And I would go home and cry myself to sleep. It was a tough gig. One particular story was the game changer for me. I was on my way home from Jerusalem to Chicago for a family event. And I stopped in Washington, D.C. to see my best friend. And actually, Rabbi, you know her, we had discussed it, Lisa Eisen. So I stayed with Lisa, and then I got a call. Can you be at the White House tomorrow morning? It's top secret. And I was like, oh yeah, I will be there. And there I was, one of 3 reporters from the Jerusalem Post, covering the famous handshake between President Bill Clinton, the late Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, and PLO leader Yasser Arafat. It was exhilarating covering that piece of history. And then we all know what happened. The peace process went south. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. I remember this horrific moment like it was yesterday. Leah Rabin, his wife, known as the Jackie O of Israel, became the lioness, taking care of a country whose dreams of peace had been shattered, caring for an entire country while she herself was in the deepest pain of her entire life, having to bury her husband, an Israeli hero of 47 years. Well, Leah Rabin granted me the exclusive interview for Vogue magazine just less than 2 weeks after the assassination. And she invited me up to her home in Tel Aviv. And you can imagine it's Israel. So on the wall where you had to find the names of who lived in the apartment building, it said simply in pencil, Rabin in pencil. And I remember taking that elevator up, and I had never been so terrified in my life. And Leah entered the room, hand outstretched graciously, and we sat across from each other, coffee in hand, with just enough emotional distance. Leah Rabin was nobody's victim. But during the interview, I asked her one particular question. Mrs. Rabin, is he proud of you, the way you have stepped inside his shoes, mothering an entire country when you yourself are in such deep pain? She looked at me, this stoic woman mourning her husband, carrying the weight of the entire country on her shoulders, and she began to cry. So she cried, I cried, and we held each other. There was no journalist subject separation, and we stayed in contact as friends from that moment on until her death in 2000. This story, for me, remains to this day one of my most meaningful pieces. I'm just going to check in. Are we working? We're good?
Everything's good.
We're good. Okay.
Great. Yep.
Sometimes I know it gets, it pauses. So just wanted to make sure. And so from Jerusalem, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I went on to become the managing editor of Moment magazine, which was founded by Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel. And then from there, I moved back to Chicago and served as an editor and reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, where I launched the newspaper's first women's section called Lifestyles. And my first interview was with my personal literary crush, Erica Jong, on the 30th anniversary of the groundbreaking Fear of Flying, which I read at 9 years old, of course, stolen off my parents' top shelf. So why am I telling you all this, giving you this very detailed background? Because my 24-year-old journalist in Woman on Fire, Her name is Jules Roth. She's the main character. And she has a lot of me, probably the most of me of any character I've ever written. But she was the me of years ago, before I became seasoned and jaded, before life got in the way of idealism, before kids got in the way of fearlessness, before I knew better than to take on risky assignments. Now I just write about them from my little cushy corner in suburbia. But long ago, I actually lived this. And I decided that I really wanted to write about a time and a place that I really loved. So I even gave Jules one of my own backstories in this book. So when I was 17 years old, I was on an internship program in Springfield, Illinois. That's our state capital, for a semester in high school. And I was approached by a special law enforcement unit, and they asked me, would I be willing to be used as bait to lure and break and help break a sex trafficking ring? And I'm like, hello, of course I said yes. And in those days, you didn't need a parent to sign off on anything. So I was 17 and I signed off, and I was used as bait to help break this sex trafficking ring, and people were arrested. As you can imagine, for a teenager, this was a pivotal moment. And I knew from that moment on, I was going to have a career as a journalist, and I was determined to expose and break the tough stories and do whatever it takes to reveal the truth. I wrote Woman on Fire during COVID lockdown. I worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I wanted to write a book, as I had mentioned, that I had everything in it that I love to read myself. So Woman on Fire is a bit of a mutt. It's history and art and passion and risky journalistic pursuits, and of course, strong, fiery women. Woman on Fire is a gripping tale of a savvy young journalist who gets embroiled in a major international art scandal centered around a Nazi-looted masterpiece. Like all three of my books, this novel asks the question, how far would you go for your passion? Would you kill for it, steal for it, or like Jules Roth, fight for it, even if the price tag is your own life or those you love? Throughout my career, I was a full-time working journalist by day, and at night, I worked on my fiction. I always say that the story that keeps you up at night is the one you have to write, have to go after, no matter what. It is the story that makes you stop in your tracks. My obsession with stolen art began years ago. So let's flash back to June 1991. I was a young journalist just out of graduate school, and I was assigned by my editor to cover an exhibit at the Art Institute of Chicago. It was called Degenerate Art, The Fate of the Avant-Garde in Nazi Germany. When I walked into the museum, my breath caught in my throat, and I literally had chills covering my arms after viewing more than 150 paintings that the Nazis deemed degenerate, deplorable, and illegal. I knew I was not just reporting any story. I had found my story, the one that would forever change the course of my career and cleave to my soul. As a daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I began to deep dive into the world of Nazi-looted art, reading and researching anything I could get my hands on. Now, I'm a writer, not an artist, but I needed to understand what made someone both a murderous madman and an artist. Yes, Hitler, before he became Hitler, was a painter. He had been rejected twice from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and he had resorted to selling painted postcards on the street and later house painting. His dream of living as an artist was never realized. I truly believe that these early rejections set the stage for what would come later. Hitler's first mission, once in power, beginning in 1933, was to destroy those artists, architects, entertainers, writers, philosophers, and teachers who did not comply with the Aryan ideal of what is art. The Nazis were determined to eradicate the avant-garde, particularly the Expressionists, a homegrown German movement of art. They were the free thinkers. Between 1933 and 1945, the Third Reich confiscated, destroyed, and plundered upwards of 600,000 works of art from private collections, museums, galleries, schools, and studios. It was a cultural rape and robbery on the grandest scale that began in Germany and spread like wildfire throughout Europe. Supply stores were shut down, galleries were boarded up, paintings were burned, curators were stripped of their jobs, museums were closed, artists were subject to public ridicule and banned from exhibiting or selling their works. They were even forbidden from creating art inside the privacy of their own homes. Many artists were forced to hide, numerous artists committed suicide, and countless others were imprisoned and murdered. This was the background and the catalyst for my award-winning debut historical novel, Fugitive Colors. And I have it right here, this novel right here. This is one of the earlier versions. Fugitive Colors, I wrote it when I was in Jerusalem and I was on bed rest with my eldest daughter, who's now 25, for 9 months. I was on bed rest for 9 months, and I used that time and I wrote the first draft of that book. Fugitive Colors is a suspenseful tale of art, love, lust, friendship, jealousy, deception, and revenge on the eve of World War II. It is the story of what happens to young Julian Klein, who gave up his Orthodox religion to move from Chicago to Paris to paint freely, and the price tag for following his passion. Julian's coming of age tale signifies the incredible impact art had on Hitler's war. And now, more than 80 years later, after most of the Holocaust survivors and Nazis have passed, this subject is still front page news. While Fugitive Colors is about the fate of the artists in Nazi Germany, Woman on Fire is about the fate of the art itself, particularly one painting called Woman on Fire, a painting by the leading expressionist Ernst Engel, who was murdered by the Nazis in Fugitive Colors. And his last known surviving painting is called Woman on Fire. That's what we call in my business inserting an Easter egg. So for those of you who read Fugitive Colors, this is a bit of a treat for you in Woman on Fire. While many works of art were destroyed, those paintings, like Woman on Fire, deemed valuable by the Nazi regime, were held hostage. The Nazis took what they considered the most lucrative and sought after works for themselves and sold major art anonymously by creating fake histories and, with the help of Switzerland, held secretive auctions for these major works of art. They then funneled the immense profits of so-called degenerate art into the Nazi war machine. Art was currency, art was control. But that wasn't enough. The Nazis were determined to create a facade of legitimacy by fabricating an impeccable paper trail to show that many of these stolen artworks were sold to the Reich willingly. And this is what I call the big lie. For example, in Nazi Germany, if families were forced into a concentration camp, their personal records were destroyed and replaced with fake documents and forced bills of sale. The Nazis also fabricated tax debt that was marked paid by the acquisition of the Jewish family's art. Ironically, the Nazis' obsession with this so-called legitimate paper trail is now being used against them as evidence of forced sales under extreme duress, which under the law now nullifies the sale itself. And this is what families now who are trying to get their stolen paintings back are using as their legal sort of evidence to get their family's artwork back. And the good news, there has been progress. So just a few months ago, for example, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of a family who had been fighting for 20 years. Can you just imagine those legal fees? 20 years in courts to have their family's Pissarro returned. A painting which they had the proof showcasing on their grandparents' mantelpiece. It was theirs. And they won on the basis of forced sales under duress, that principle that I had just explained earlier. So this Supreme Court case is pivotal in the world of stolen art. But what about the thousands of stolen paintings worldwide that are still in our revered museums and in private collections? Art whose true history has not yet been revealed. This is the background for Women on Fire. So having come from a journalist background, all of my books and my work has a news nugget that inspires the fiction. So Woman on Fire was inspired by the Cornelius Gurlitt art scandal known as the Munich art hoard, exposed in 2013. And this story sent shockwaves throughout the world. More than 1,500 major works of art worth approximately $1.5 billion was discovered hidden for nearly 50 years in a rundown, dilapidated Munich apartment of one Cornelius Gurlitt, who passed away in 2014 amid the scandal. His father was Hildebrand Gurlitt, one of Hitler's 4 authorized dealers of Nazi looted art. When he died, he bequeathed this massive treasure trove to his reclusive son, who hid the masterpieces in a food pantry and even inside his stove, layered like lasagna. And we're talking the caliber of Picasso, Chagall, Cézanne, Matisse. When I first read this whole expose, again, I stopped in my tracks. Chills rose along my arms, and I knew I had my story once again. And so, no spoilers for those who haven't read the book, but I start Woman on Fire right there with my unscrupulous art dealer, Margot de Laurent, who basically robs this treasure trove. But if you rob the robber, is it a crime? So that's where my book kind of starts. Why stolen art? Why does this subject keep pulling me in? I try to imagine what would happen if my laptop and phone were confiscated. My ability to access research was quashed. My manuscript set in flames, my editor and anyone in the writing world arrested for working with me. And anything I write would be considered a crime against my country. This is what it was like under Nazi Germany. Sadly, we are seeing history repeat itself in the Ukraine right now. Museums and art galleries are working day and night, 24/7, to save the art and treasures from the Russian perpetrators. In more positive news, museums are slowly coming forward, coughing up their stolen art little by little. Recently, the Louvre gave up 14 masterworks that had been hiding on its revered walls for the past 50 or 60 years. And here's the biggie. Just last month in August, breaking news in the stolen art world. New York museums are now required to disclose artwork looted by the Nazis, what I call the Mitzvah Initiative, signed into legislation as part of a bigger Holocaust legislation in New York. This is fantastic. So literally, if you go to New York and see any of the museums and you see a painting, it's going to have a plaque if it's been stolen or if their provenance, meaning their history, is unknown. There's going to be a little plaque next to it. It is now law. And especially now with surging anti-Semitism, I am so happy to see this happening, and I'm hoping for a domino reaction. Righting the wrongs of history. It's all about the fight and seeking the truth and not giving up. We have all had our personal fights for ourselves and for those we love. My personal fight was for my kids. In 2002, my ex-husband disappeared, literally. We have not seen or heard from him since. He abandoned me and my two daughters, who were then 5 and 3, took all of our money and left me with 67 cents in the bank. I still have that receipt. I had to fight. I had to survive, but I still had to be fun mommy while I was going through hell. But I never gave up believing in love or gave up hope. Because when you are going through your darkest moments, I always say, focus on the silver linings, the wonderful, perhaps miraculous things that grow out of hardship and pain and difficult times. When I was at ground zero in my life, and I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, my husband now of 18 years, David Barr, walked into my life and into my heart. He later adopted my two daughters. So if you read the beginning of the book, it's not a mistake. It's dedicated to David, Noah, Maya, and Maya. I'm the mom with the two Mayas. He had a Maya and I had a Maya and I have a Noah. So we merged together. In the wake of my world, which had fallen apart back then, new roots started to grow. And I had come back to life, better, greener, happier, smarter, stronger, and yes, empowered. The turbulent times in my own life was the emotional basis for my second novel called The Unbreakables. Here it is right here. And it's very different from Fugitive Colors and from Woman on Fire. This book is about a woman named Sophie Bloom, a Chicago mom. She's an artist, a sculptor who loses everything and flees to the south of France to rediscover her joie de vivre, a lust for life, love, sex, and of course, art. And it was her time to survive and ultimately thrive. Perhaps you're seeing a little bit of a pattern here. Every book I write has art in the background. Every book I write has a story that is a fight to the finish line. Empowered women, characters who follow their passion no matter what, twists and turns, mistakes and corrections. But in every story, I like to say that I leave my reader with hope. Woman on Fire is dedicated to my family and especially to my grandma Rachel, who was my best friend, a fighter, a Holocaust survivor who had seen the worst of mankind, having lost both parents and all her siblings in Auschwitz. But she still believed in love, believed in goodness, laughed with her whole body. Nothing could get in the way of the joy she felt about her family and her legacy. She taught me that. She will always be the voice in my head, and her spirit guides my hand, the stories I choose, the words that move me to write. I wanted to share one last story because, as you can see, I love stories. So it was early October 2021, and I had just read actress Sharon Stone's memoir, The Beauty of Living Twice, and I was blown away. She had, of course, the Me Too tales of Hollywood, but she had also discussed how she had a stroke and was given 1% chance to live. And it took her 7 years to recover, but she fought every inch of the way. And I thought, wow. And at the same time, I had received a book blurb from a wonderful author named Kristen Harmel, who said in her book blurb to me, which if you've seen them, they're the praise that an author gives another author, and it's on the front of the book or the back of the book. Well, she said in the last line of her blurb, Woman on Fire is woman in gold meets spotlight meets basic instinct. And I thought, wow, this is a sign. I'm going to send my book to one celebrity. Let's just see what happens. So I sent this book And it was before it became a book, actually. It was an advanced reader's copy, which goes out to the media before the public got the book. Well, I sent it cold to Sharon Stone, and I thought, you know what? It's going to be trashed. Whatever. I did it. Let's see what happens. So I was sitting on the couch with my husband watching Netflix like everybody else. And all of a sudden, I get a text and I look and it says, "Hi, it's Sharon Stone. I'm in Dubai and I'm on vacation. I'm reading your book and I love it. Has it been optioned?" And I was like, mic drop. And my first thought, it was one of those, I'm in Barcelona. I lost all my money. Can you help me? And then I remembered that I had sent her this book and this is happening. And so it was like a dream. Within 3 to 4 weeks, we ended up signing a contract, and she's now set to produce and star in the film adaptation of Woman on Fire. And together, our goal is to showcase the incredible history of one powerful painting as it moves through hands, hearts, and history. So I just wanted to thank you for this beautiful honor of having me here with you today. And as I always say, and I told the rabbi, I'm an open book. So I welcome your questions, ask me anything, bring it on so I can get to know you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I hear somebody's unmuted so they could applaud
Yeah,
you. You would hear a lot of applause if we were all together. Lisa, thank you. And really for all of the additional background, and certainly many of the questions that people posed to me were incorporated into what you shared with us, because as you said, you're an open book and you love telling stories, and what amazing stories you have to tell. I know I've spoken to more than one person who is here right now who people have shared that after they finished reading this, they went back to read your other books as well. So I know many of us are excited to do that and to continue to read your books. So I have a few questions that I wanted to share that are specifically about the book itself. I think many of the questions about what inspired you and the connections to art and to stolen art have certainly been, you've spoken to those. So one of the questions was that having I believe that this writer was this question was coming about specifically about Lillian Dassel, the elderly woman, having her be so sharp was a very pleasant surprise. And is that something you planned for at the beginning?
So Lillian's probably one of my favorite characters because she's completely based on my grandmother. So I gave her all the qualities of my grandmother. So she was going to be sharp as a tack, and she was going to be, every inch of Lillian I wrote with love. So yes, I knew exactly who she was going to be. Yes, I knew exactly how Lillian was going to develop and what she was going to contribute to the story.
Right. On the flip side, or not really the flip side, but how do you create a psychopath like Margot?
Well, if you asked every single writer who comes to one of your events, do they enjoy writing their good characters or their evil characters? You will get 100% that enjoy writing the darker characters. And, I always laugh and say she's the mean girl from high school. But in reality, any good character who's on the dark side is not all dark. She's not all black and white. And so I knew I was going to create Margot, who people can empathize with her. She had a very troubled childhood. She was neglected. She was rejected. She was left alone. She was the lonely rich girl with 2 spoiled parents who were never around. But her one soft spot for this psychopath who did terrible things was her grandfather, and her grandfather loved this painting. So for her, this was the one meaningful piece for her. Her grandfather, the only person she felt that truly cared about her in her life, she was going to fight to get this painting, which meant so much to him. So I did, every time I sat down on my computer and I was on the Margot section, I'm like, ooh, great, it's Margot. And, then you can kind of just let loose. Perhaps, obviously much darker than my own impulses, but the darkest side, I would say.
All of your female characters are very strong. Tell us a little bit about writing strong female characters. Certainly, having listened to you and learned a bit more about you, we understand why, because you are a strong female character. But tell us a little bit about that process for you, and really filled with strong female characters.
So I knew I wanted this book to be a woman versus woman showdown. And so you have Margot, the very sort of the villain, the very seasoned villain. And then you had Jules, who is idealistic and who's going to go after the truth no matter what. So Margot looked at Jules and thought, oh my God, her? I can take her down like this. But what and that was Jules's secret weapon, being underestimated. And so that, I think, was what kind of kept that story going. And as it went on, I developed sort of a mutual respect for each of one another. And that was just, I really wanted to create two strong women. But Jules is also the product of a very strong single mother, which I had been a single mom for, 3 years before meeting my husband and David, and hardest job in the world, literally hands down the hardest. And so I wanted Jules to take all the best of what her mother could offer her. So you have kind of the Margot, Jules, Lillian, the older woman, and Jules's mother, as four very strong women, each having very different qualities, but the thing that they all four shared was strength, for sure.
So strength is certainly a powerful theme. Revenge is also a powerful theme throughout your book, and each character grappling with it. Which characters do you feel take vengeance too far at the expense of their own happiness, and why is that price tag worth it to them?
So there's one that I want to say, but if people haven't read the book, it will spoil it. But I think each of the characters, even Jules, where you have the theme that I really tried to create is, what is the fine line between the pursuit of justice and the hunt for revenge? And so each of the characters, they vacillate from both sides, and those who go too far will pay the price ultimately. And Jules goes far, at times too far, but she's able to reel it back in. But there are other characters who cannot. So I played with that for sure.
You shared with me a quote by the artist Joan Miro, who said, "You can look at a picture for a week and never think of it again. You can also look at a picture for a second and think of it all your life." And we certainly see that in this book. Finding this painting, Woman on Fire, becomes an obsession because of what it represents to each character: love, loss, and the past. Can you discuss the importance of this?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think, to answer your question with just veering off a little bit, my goal was to create this masterwork, an expressionist painting. Sometimes it's very hard for people to really understand. Like when you say 6 million Jews, died or were murdered. And it's much easier for someone to grapple with a Schindler's List type of presentation, where you have it narrowed down and how, one family is impacted, and to reflect the bigger picture. So that's what I tried to do here as well, how one painting impacted all these lives, and the lengths that people would go to get this one painting back because of its meaning. But me the person who wants to teach and that wants the reader to walk away with a knowledge of stolen art and what happened, is how this one painting reflects the bigger picture of the 600,000 works of art that had been confiscated or stolen or that are still out there. So I think that was my goal, and to sort of take the history behind it, throw in suspense so it became sort of a page turner, but also throw in tidbits that maybe people didn't know, like Hugo Boss was the designer of all the Nazi uniforms. And a lot of people, many Jewish readers, had no idea that Hugo Boss was a rabid anti-Semite, and that, the company later apologized. But I wanted to, through my research, I love uncovering small, pivotal factoids. And so in order to really give everything that went behind the scenes of this painting the weight it needed to have. So yeah, that's how I presented it.
So I'm curious too, you just pulled out that one little factoid. There's so much information. I can only imagine how much research into any book, but really not just the art component, and certainly the journalistic side of things that you have as part of your background, but Chicago, New York, south of France, Paris, like how did you, what was your method? What was the method to your madness
The method to my madness.
Research?
So I am a research geek. I think my background as an investigative journalist comes in handy. And I always say it's a blessing and a curse to be a journalist author, because my author friends might have 5 sources and they're like, okay, let's call it a day. This is a fact. But not me. I have to have 20 sources to prove that a fact is a fact, and then I can move on. So for example, the research process for Fugitive Colors, my first book, I researched for 4 full years before I would allow myself pen to paper. I went to Europe, I did interviews, lots of documentaries, lots of first person accounts, no stone left unturned. I even had the book sent to the US Holocaust Museum to vet it. My feeling was, and especially as I mentioned, being the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, is if you're writing about the Holocaust, you have to get it right. Because there's always going to be that one person who's going to say, you know what, that didn't happen. I was there. My mother was there. That's not how it happened. And so I, for lack of a better word, became sort of a quasi-expert in stolen art with my first book. So that by the time I came to Woman on Fire, I had a really strong base. Not to say that I didn't research my butt off, because I did, and if you could see my office, it's literally the girls surrounded by books piled high and documents and paperwork, all that crazy. And, my kids make fun of me, but my kitchen table with the leaves pulled out, our dining room table with the leaves pulled out, have top to bottom for about 2 weeks my outline. And if you look at my Instagram, Lisa Barr 18, for anyone who wants to look, you could actually see the method to my madness. And so every inch of those tables are covered just like jewels in the book, with note cards and sticky notes and all my crazy. For 2 full tables, my family's eating at the coffee table in front of the TV. And then I pull them all aside, push it all aside, and then I sit down and let the characters do the work. But it's in my head, in my blood, everything that I just outlined. And it's madness. I love it, but it's crazy.
Now, was it a little different this time with were you writing during COVID?
Yes.
Did you have more everyone home and so less space to spread everything out?
It's funny you ask that, because, my girls are 25, 23, and 22, lots of drama in my house, very close, close in age. But I kind of loved it that my kids all came home during COVID. So if you can imagine, I was sitting at my kitchen table writing. looking across my laptop, I'm writing about a 24-year-old girl, a young woman, and I'm looking at my 24-year-old daughter over my laptop as I write. So I, I don't know if this is sacrilegious to say this, but I kind of loved that period of time because I had my whole family and, we would take breaks and walks together. And it was just, I don't know, I had everyone home without distraction and got to be mom in a big way again. And I love that. And we worked together. So listen, my writer friends had it tough who had young kids in Zoom trying to write. I mean, I remember those days, not the Zoom days, but trying to write, nursing one-handed, typing out my first novel. So I feel like I'm in a situation now that time is my own, that I can write and work and get the job done.
Lisa, I can totally relate. My kids are just a little bit younger than yours. My oldest is 22, but that time when they were home was a gift. When we talked a lot about finding the silver linings during it, and for me, that was a huge silver lining of being all together, having dinner together, being able to take those walks during the day on breaks. And one of my sisters had when at the start of COVID, my nephew was 2, and she's a single mom. And, just even imagining being in that place, but I'm glad that it was uplifting and inspiring for you to be able to have them around as you were doing all of this research, covering all the tables, and then as you're sitting and writing. And we are certainly the beneficiaries. So, so my question for you, we know we have some of your past books that we can go back and read, but what are you working on now?
So, there's no rest for the weary. So I'm on tour, and I'm on deadline with my new book due in March. And so every time I try to walk away from World War II, it pulls me back in. So I'm working on a book about a legendary Hollywood actress. Think old Hollywood. She's a femme fatale, kind of known for, think like Lauren Bacall, who's actually Betty Persky in real life. But this Hollywood actress has a very dark, secret past that took place in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that no one knows. So it's about to be exposed. So that's what I'm working on right now.
It sounds intriguing. We often go back to, we read lots of books that are connected to the Holocaust in some way. And even though sometimes we say, okay, let's try not to do a Holocaust book, but there's so many connections, and there are so many wonderful books out there. And certainly we will be thrilled to read your book and hopefully have you back and perhaps even have you in person. But Lisa, I want to thank you for your time today, but most importantly for your beautiful writing, engaging and really captivating, I think, for all of us. And we're so grateful to be able to have an opportunity to talk with you about it, and to be able to wish you and everyone here a Shana Tova. May your year be a good year, a sweet year, a healthy year, and may it be filled with no writer's block. and we're excited about, you'll have to keep us posted about Sharon Stone as well. We'll look forward to an outing to the movies. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me, and Shana Tova to all of you. And I'm very accessible. So if you're interested in seeing my process and what I do, like follow me on, Instagram and Facebook or whatever you like. And thank you so much for all this and everything that you put into it.